They came with banners of light and mouths full of promises, speaking in thousands of harmonious frequencies. Tall, shimmering beings, elegant, ancient, confident. The Varelians. First contact. Humanity's greatest moment, or so they said. They hovered above Earth like gods in their silver vessels, scanning us with polite smiles and eyes that never blinked. They didn't ask for permission. They announced their arrival. United Nations officials clapped like fools. The media spun it like a new dawn. They told us, in perfect translated speech, "You've reached the threshold. You've split the atom, cracked fusion, played with AI. It is time for integration." Integration, that's the word they used, as if Earth was some half-broken machine waiting to be installed into their utopia, as if we were finally worthy to be tolerated. But the ones who run things behind closed doors, they knew better. Presidents and generals from the quiet rooms deep under mountains didn't smile. They didn't celebrate. They tried to warn them. A quiet message was sent back to the stars. You really don't want this. No threats, no bluster, just a calm, measured truth. But the Varelians laughed in their own way. Smooth gestures and condescending nods. Primitive threats, they called them. Feral pride. They moved fast after that. 1 week later, they disabled Earth's satellite grid in under 9 minutes. Nukes were turned to duds. Communications blacked out. Suborbital weapons frozen mid-flight. Cities lost power. Governments crumbled faster than anyone imagined. Even the most paranoid prepper wasn't ready for how fast it fell. The Varelians offered no demands. They restructured. Borders dissolved overnight. Languages were harmonized. Currency became irrelevant. Every child under 10 was reallocated for integration into the Varelian mind-sharing educational arc. They told us this was peace. We nodded. We obeyed. We gave them our best smiles. We let them walk through our ruins with curious eyes, admiring the ashes they created. They didn't notice the silence. No one spoke of resistance. No one built weapons. No one rioted. Humanity waited. Somewhere beneath the rubble of Geneva, where once proud nations gathered, there was a room. No windows, no tech that could be scanned or read. Just silence, sweat, and a single man named Kane, sitting with a small group of very, very old men who remembered things the Varelians couldn't calculate. Kane was one of them. Not a general. Not a politician. Just a former soldier with scars and silence in his eyes. A man who had fought in wars that history books had tried to erase. The kind of man the Varelians never saw because he didn't scream. He didn't lead. He remembered. They'd killed his brother during integration. A miscalculation, they said. A warning strike. But Kane didn't weep. He watched, listened, waited, and when the moment came, when the final line was crossed, when they took the children from the refugee camps and told the parents they wouldn't remember them anyway, that's when the doors of hell opened. No lasers, no fancy tech, no great speeches, just human rage. From the slums of Lagos to the backwoods of Appalachia, from the snow-locked caves in Siberia to the deserts where the satellites thought no one lived, we rose. Not with grand armies, with cells. With minds sharpened by suffering, with tools older than empires and tricks learned from 100 bloody conflicts. The first Varelian command ship exploded above what was once New Delhi, not shot down, infiltrated, from the inside. They never found out how. They didn't understand that humans don't break cleanly. We shatter into blades. Kane didn't lead a resistance. He unleashed one. And the universe, well, it started to learn. Too late. The ashes from the New Delhi detonation hadn't even finished falling before half the Varelian command network lit up with emergency transmissions. High-frequency pulses meant for faster-than-light relays screamed across their fleet, bursting into static mid-transmission. Silence followed. For the first time in 3,000 galactic cycles, the Varelians couldn't talk to themselves. Humanity had learned to kill the signal. They'd spent decades monitoring our primitive tech, mocking our radiation-soaked networks, our crude satellites, our chaotic data bursts. But that was the mistake. They thought we hadn't evolved. They thought all our brilliance sat in visible systems, neat and tagged for extraction. But the real minds? The ones who wrote code in the shadows, who forged systems deep in darknets and isolated bunkers, they never forgot how to go dark. EMP pulses, hacked relay nodes, Varelian frequency injection decoders, old-school guerrilla tech mixed with repurposed alien scraps, chaos with a purpose. The second ship fell over the Pacific, not shot down, boarded. A team of 12 men and 1 woman, all tagged as non-hostile, non-essential by Varelian scans, launched from what appeared to be a broken oil rig. The ship's defense grid never fired. Recognition filters labeled their old-world equipment as biological waste movement units. They weren't waste. They were the fist. Varelians bled. Not red, but bright white and vapor-thin. Their bodies broke like silk snapping under stress, elegant and frail, and they weren't trained for pain. They never had to be. Their civilization hadn't fought a war in over 800 years. Humanity's last 80 years had been nothing but war. They moved like dancers in armor, with ceremonial blades and gentle energy restraints. Beautiful, balanced, precise. And they got butchered. One of the human insurgents, a former factory worker named Dunn, rammed a crowbar through a Varelian's throat while screaming, "This is for my kids, you pale fuck." Blood mist sprayed over the walls. The ship's AI reported a full breakdown in environmental balance and began quarantine protocols. It was too late. They'd hardwired explosives into their own oxygen tanks and set them off with makeshift ion charges once they reached the core. The vessel fractured in mid-air like glass cracking under heat, broke into 6 flaming pieces, and plunged into the ocean like a dying god. The Varelians tried to respond. They issued planetary calming measures. Cities were gassed. Drones patrolled the streets and fired stun rounds that paralyzed victims for weeks. They built new towers, sleek and humming with silent control frequencies, meant to pacify aggressive neural tendencies. And that was their second mistake. They thought humans had a limit. In the undergrounds of collapsed metro stations, in the woods where satellites no longer scanned, men trained like wolves, fathers with dead children, brothers who watched their families disappear in clean white ships, soldiers who'd been discharged long ago but never forgot how to hate. One of them was known only as Rusk, a name not recorded in any system, not attached to any military registry. He didn't lead with speeches. He didn't command. He moved in silence, with scars running down his back like a map of old wars. When he looked at you, it felt like something ancient had just turned its head. Kane knew him. They never spoke much, just nods, mutual understanding. Rusk took the eastern sector, coordinating the blackout across Eurasia. Whole cities disappeared from orbital scans. Not destroyed, vanished. Varelians called it a quantum echo displacement event. They had no idea it was just humans rigging old power plants to generate massive electromagnetic curtains, hiding everything underneath. Primitive? No, just human. By the end of the first month, the Varelians declared Earth unstable. But even then, they didn't evacuate. Pride held them in place. Arrogance. After all, what was humanity but a loud, violent species with poor impulse control? They hadn't learned yet. They were about to. On the 42nd day, Kane stood on a hillside outside what was once called Prague. Snow fell in clumps across the frozen landscape. Behind him, men waited. Quiet, armored in stitched-together vests, carrying weapons made from scavenged scrap and stolen Varelian plating. Below them, a new integration tower stood, a gleaming spear of silver and white built in 3 days. It pulsed softly with alien energy, a beacon of the new order. Inside were 1 to 200 children, taken weeks ago, unarmed, unaware. Kane didn't blink. "We get them out," Rusk nodded. "We burn the rest." And they did. The assault wasn't graceful. It wasn't filmed. No one would ever write ballads about it. It was blood and steel and desperation. Humans crawling through sewer pipes with knives in their teeth. Silent takedowns of guards with faces like mannequins. Explosives rigged with kitchen timers and hairdryer parts. They fought dirty. Because that's how you fight when there's no backup coming. By the time the children were freed, 2 Varelian commanders were hanging by their necks from a broken support beam. Kane lit the tower's core himself, took a long drag from an unfiltered cigarette, first one in years, and watched the structure melt in a firestorm of alien screams and ozone-scented death. He didn't smile. He didn't cheer. He just said one thing. "Now they know." But the galaxy wasn't watching yet. Far beyond Earth's orbit, on the moons of Volcaris, the Varelian High Circle gathered in orbit. 32 beings, ancient and untouchable, reviewed reports with disdain. "This is containment failure," one hissed. "This is statistical variance," another corrected. "Humans are volatile. We knew this." A third flicked a glowing finger across the report. "They've taken down 7 ships, 17 towers, and now reports indicate their virus has breached our communication web." Silence. That was new. One Varelian, older than the others, skin dull with age, finally whispered, "They told us. We ignored it." He played the audio again, retrieved from Earth's first warning. "You really don't want this." No threats, just prophecy. They stared at the human voice like it was a riddle they'd failed to solve. Too late. On Earth, the tide was no longer turning. It had turned. Humanity, beaten and strangled and mocked, now moved like a disease, fast, silent, incurable. They didn't wear uniforms. They wore pain. They didn't fight for nations. They fought for graves. Kane led less now. His name had spread like smoke in a dry forest. Some said he wasn't even real, just a myth made from blood and grit. But he moved through bunkers and fire lines, carrying with him the weight of the dead. Every room he entered went quiet. Every Varelian captured never lived to see interrogation. Rusk had developed a method, reverse translation memory playback. The alien mind could be cracked open like an egg under the right frequencies. It was hell to watch, and worse to listen to. But it worked. Soon, they learned about the real purpose of the integration towers. They weren't just centers for culture and control. They were harvest points. Children weren't just being re-educated. They were being decoded. Human neural patterns, chaotic, unpredictable, beautifully irrational, were being cataloged, broken down, turned into weapons. Not for Earth, for other species. The Varelians were preparing for something else, something they feared. And humanity's mind was the perfect tool. They never planned to let us live. They came for the data in our brains. Kane stared at the report for an hour, hands shaking. "I warned them," he whispered. And then he burned the file, piece by piece, while outside air sirens echoed through the night. At the 90-day mark, Earth was no longer considered a compliant territory. The Varelians escalated. Orbital bombardment. They fired kinetic rods from low orbit. No explosives, just pure velocity. Whole cities disappeared under impact craters the size of mountains. That was the third mistake. They thought fear would bring surrender. Instead, they triggered the Black Protocol, something buried, old, not sanctioned, not even official. It lived under the Arctic ice, the last resort, a lab run by men whose names were erased decades ago. Engineers, scientists, devils in human form. They'd created a virus, not biological, mimetic. A thought so dangerous, so corrosive to control systems, that any AI exposed to it either locked itself in permanent shutdown or began self-destruct protocols out of pure logic collapse. The Varelians ran on perfect AI. Kane authorized the release. One file, one phrase. "You don't understand us because we don't understand ourselves." Broadcast through an old Cold War satellite. Low orbit. Untraceable. Within 48 hours, 9 Varelian orbital processors failed. 3 warships shut down mid-flight and crashed into the oceans. Drones fell from the sky like rain. Kane didn't watch. He was already preparing for what came next. Because he knew. The universe wouldn't just send diplomats anymore. They'd send gods. Space isn't silent. That's a myth. It hums. Beneath the silence, there's a frequency, a low, grinding whisper of radiation and particles, of time rubbing against metal and vacuum. It speaks if you know how to listen. The Varelians had listened for centuries. It told them everything, until Earth went quiet. The frequency was gone, no signals, no cries for help, no trade requests, not even resistance broadcasts, just silence. And that scared them more than war ever could. Back on Earth, the ruins of former cities glowed red under a sky choked with ash. Integration towers stood in twisted heaps, their alien elegance shattered into broken teeth. Fields were scorched, rivers choked with debris. Satellites, Varelian, human, hybrid, drifted aimlessly, blind and dumb. And in the middle of it all, Kane walked through hell like he'd built it. He hadn't slept in 3 days. Didn't need to. Sleep was a luxury from a time before his brother's body was burned alive in a Varelian cleansing beam. His coat hung torn over his shoulders. Dust clung to his beard. A long scar across his left cheek was still raw from shrapnel. But his eyes were clear. A group of survivors waited in the bunker beneath what was once Zurich. 17 in total. Fighters, techs, medics, and a single boy no older than 9 holding a rifle too big for his arms. Kane didn't say much when he entered. He just looked at the boy, then at the rifle, then back at the group. "This ends," he said. Someone asked, "How?" And Kane did something no one had seen him do since day one. He smiled. Across the stars, in the galactic capital of Varela's, the Varelian High Circle convened an emergency session. Not holograms, not neural projections. In person. That hadn't happened in over 600 years, because for the first time in the modern galactic era, a species had not surrendered. A display hovered in the center of the room. It showed Earth no longer highlighted in green but black, contaminated, unstable, unreadable. 3 fleets had been lost. Orbital control was gone. Data flow disrupted. Viral interference from a single human meme had crashed 6 central AI cores. More frightening. The Varelian minds exposed to the meme began to question orders. Doubt, insubordination, self-preservation. The virus wasn't digital, it was human thought, emotion turned into logic, chaos wrapped in clarity. They'd thought humanity was disorganized. Now they saw it for what it was. Unpredictable. Unstoppable. Terminal. The lead chancellor. A silver-skinned entity with 10 eye slits and a mind wired to 8 subminds, stood motionless. Then, with the weight of ancient authority, he said, "Invoke Project Godborn." Gasps. Real ones, even among beings who hadn't gasped in centuries. Project Godborn was never meant to be real. A myth, a final deterrent, the creation of a force that wasn't Varelian, something bred for extermination, A tool. Not alive. Not part of their culture. Just born to end things that wouldn't end themselves. And now, for the first time since the forming of the Galactic Accord, the Varelians were afraid enough to release it. Earth. 2 weeks later. The sky cracked open. It wasn't fire. It wasn't thunder. It was worse. A ripple, like reality splitting at the seams. A ship emerged. No, not a ship. A being. A living weapon. It didn't land. It arrived. And when it stood in the crater it made, it stood 12 feet tall, its skin made of some black-blue alloy that shimmered like oil and screamed like metal when it moved. No face, just a smooth plate of dark light. No voice. It didn't need one. They called it Vexar. Kane watched the footage from a secure feed hacked through stolen Varelian tech. He stood in a former high school gymnasium, now turned command post, surrounded by men with blood in their eyes and ash in their lungs. Vexar had landed outside what was left of Cape Town. In 6 minutes, it killed 3,000 people. Not bombed, not vaporized, killed. By hand, by claw, by sheer cold efficiency. It moved through resistance fighters like death incarnate. Weapons had no effect. Bullets ricocheted. Energy beams melted on contact. Even the scavenged Varelian blades couldn't pierce its hide. It wasn't fighting. It was cleansing. One of Kane's men cursed under his breath. What the fuck is that thing? Kane didn't answer. He just turned to the boy with the rifle. The one from Zurich. The boy hadn't spoken since his sister was taken. He just followed Kane now, watched him, learned. Kane knelt, looked him in the eye. You ready to help me kill a god? The boy nodded once. Rusk returned the same night. His face was burned, half of it. His voice was raw from inhaling plasma smoke, but he brought data. I found the server core, he rasped. Deep in Alaska, real deep, under the ice. Varelian black site, hidden since before they came out in the open. He tossed down a crystal chip. Everything about Vexar is in here. It's not a soldier. It's a controlled mind. Artificial, hybrid of 10 species. But it's wired. Hardwired. There's a trigger. Kane raised an eyebrow. Suicide switch? No, worse. Rusk coughed up blood and wiped his mouth. It thinks it's alive. But it isn't. It's being fed consciousness on a loop. Recorded memories, simulated trauma. The minute it sees the feed source isn't real, it collapses. Yep. Kane looked at the chip. Then we give it the truth. They hijacked the largest Varelian broadcast node on Earth, a relay tower in what used to be Cairo. Still functional, guarded by over 600 drones, and a small unit of Varelian field officers. Kane didn't plan a full assault. He walked in with a group of 6. 3 died before reaching the tower. 1 bled out, hacking the outer gate. Another lost both legs after stepping on a Varelian thermal trap. That left Kane and the boy. They reached the broadcast core in silence. The boy plugged in the chip, his hands trembling, his dirty fingers moving across an alien interface like he'd been born for it. Kane stood guard, firing stolen Varelian shots with brutal precision, each kill silent, each step earned in blood. Then the broadcast went live. Across Earth, Vexar paused mid-strike. It tilted its head as if listening, and it saw. The feed was simple, a loop of its own artificial memories, the same moment, repeated. A child's voice, a burning village, a promise of revenge, over and over, a lie, then the feed cut. Silence, and Vexar screamed, a high-pitched, shattering wail that knocked birds from the sky and split window glass for kilometers. It began tearing at its own head. Its claws dug into its plated chest. It fell to its knees. And exploded. Not in fire, in light, like something sacred had just died. The shockwave knocked out systems for miles. When the dust settled, all that remained was a crater and the scent of ozone. Kane walked out of the tower with the boy at his side, and across the galaxy, hundreds of Varelian operatives received the same message in hacked implants. Gods die too. The High Circle lost control that night. 2 member systems seceded. 3 planetary colonies declared neutrality. Varelian fleets began refusing orders. The virus of human defiance had spread, not through violence, through belief, through proof that the impossible wasn't just possible. It was inevitable. Kane became more than a man. He became the symbol, a warning etched in blood and data. And yet, he wasn't finished, not even close. Because somewhere out there, beyond the collapsing command networks and burning dreadnoughts, the Varelians were preparing their final answer. Something worse than gods. And humanity? Humanity wasn't afraid anymore. The first ship wasn't beautiful. It wasn't even whole. They called it Gravedigger. Built from the wreckage of 6 downed Varelian craft, reinforced with old Earth steel and scavenged orbital parts, it looked like a corpse held together by rust, welding scars, and fury. The hull still had scorch marks and blast craters. One section had Varelian letters half scraped off, still glowing faintly from some forgotten energy circuit. It wasn't sleek. It wasn't clean. It was ours. Inside it smelled like oil and sweat, like blood dried under boots, like hope smeared in rust. Men moved through its narrow halls with weapons slung across their backs and eyes too tired to blink. At the center of it all stood Kane, staring out through a viewport blackened by space dust. They had no jump drive, no shield matrix, no elegant Varelian defense mechanisms. What they had was worse. A target. "Coordinates locked," said the pilot, a rough-faced woman who'd lost her jaw to a Varelian beam strike. Now she spoke through a filtered vocoder, her voice sounding like broken glass scraping across steel. Kane didn't look at her. "Spin up the core." The crew around him tensed. There were no cheers, no rallying cries. They didn't fight for pride. They fought because something had to burn. "Time to impact," Kane asked. 4 hours. We'll break their sky before they see us coming." "Good." He stepped away from the viewport and walked the corridor. As he passed, men straightened up, not out of respect, but recognition. Shared pain, shared rage. Some nodded. Others just watched him like he was a ghost. They'd all seen what the Varelians did to Earth. Families turned to ash, cities wiped clean, culture dissected and mocked like a failed science project. But now Earth was off the map, and they were writing a new one. The target was known only as Havenspire, a floating orbital complex in the Varan system, 3 days from the outer ring of Earth's old exploration range. It was once a diplomatic center, a place where alien dignitaries met to discuss civilized solutions. Now it was a prison. Thousands of humans taken from cities before the resistance rose were still kept there, unregistered, forgotten, being tested, harvested. The Varelians had stopped sending updates. Maybe they assumed Earth would never make it that far. Maybe they thought Havenspire would never be touched. They forgot one thing. Humanity remembers everything. Kane entered the war room, if it could even be called that. Just a small, steel-plated chamber with flickering monitors and a table littered with scratched-out plans. Rusk sat there, one hand holding a needle jammed into his thigh. Painkiller. Probably too weak to even numb what he was feeling. "How bad is it?" Kane asked. Rusk looked up, face pale. "Bad. No real internal defense system, but the exterior ring has 6 drone nests. They'll spot us before we hit the inner orbit, and if they do, we won't make it." "No," Rusk said, injecting himself again. "But that's not the point, is it?" Kane looked at the schematics again. Ductwork layouts, vent shafts, cargo lifts, all mapped by memory from a former technician they'd rescued from a Varelian interrogation site. He died 5 hours later from neural decay, but not before drawing everything he could remember in his own blood. "Any chance we can breach without losing half the crew?" Rusk smirked. "We're past chances, Kane." Kane didn't argue. They'd passed the line between tactics and sacrifice a long time ago. Gravedigger dropped out of the black like a ghost. No comms, no beacon, no signal. Just a shadow cutting across the stars. The Varelians noticed too late. Their first drone swarm activated, but the humans had predicted their movement paths from previous orbital patterns. They'd hacked part of the algorithm weeks ago. Gravedigger launched 3 payloads, none of them missiles. Bodies. Men in jury-rigged exosuits carrying coil launchers and fusion spikes hurled themselves into space like living weapons. They didn't scream. They didn't cry. They just went. Some didn't make it. A few drifted, lost forever in vacuum. One burned alive in the burst of a failed thruster. The rest slammed into Havenspire's hull and tore it open. Within minutes, the outpost lit up with internal alarms. The Varelians weren't prepared. They'd never needed to be. Why prepare for war when you believed yourself untouchable? That was the mistake. The same one over and over again. Humans don't knock. They break down the door. Kane led the second wave himself. Breaching charges melted through the outer airlock. Atmosphere burst inward, and Kane stormed through like a storm. His weapon, a Varelian beam rifle, modified and overcharged to the point of instability, screamed with every shot. 2 Varelian guards dropped before they even turned. The third begged in a trembling voice, "Peace, please, we were told you were extinct." Kane put a hole through its chest. No hesitation. Behind him, the others followed. The boy from Zurich was among them now, no longer silent, his hands steady, his aim lethal. They didn't move like soldiers. They moved like wrath. Room by room, they cleared the outpost. No survivors, no delays. Any alien not on their knees was killed. By the time they reached the central cell block, the Varelians had started purging the prisoners. Some were shot. Others burned alive in containment rooms. A few were jettisoned into space. It wasn't enough. Kane found them. Human survivors huddled in chains, eyes sunken. Skin gray from weeks without sun or hope. He broke their locks with his bare hands. "We came back," he said. "You're not forgotten." Some wept. Others reached for the guns dropped by their captors, and within minutes, those former prisoners became part of the final wave. Havenspire burned. The outer ring collapsed under its own weight, and Gravedigger rammed the command core on purpose. Suicide strike. No one aboard. Kane and the others had already escaped in drop pods, dragging survivors through enemy fire, dodging railgun bursts and plasma fire. Only half made it out. But it was enough. The Varelians would report Havenspire as destroyed. No survivors. No data. But they'd know. They'd know it wasn't a random act. It was retaliation. A message written in blood and metal. "We can reach you anywhere." Back on Earth, the stars looked closer now. Kane stood atop a ridge overlooking the sea, the wind whipping his coat like a flag. The boy stood beside him, now holding a weapon not with fear, but ownership. "You think they'll come back harder?" the boy asked. Kane didn't answer immediately. Then, "They will." The boy nodded. "Then we hit them first." Kane looked at him. Really looked. This wasn't a boy anymore. Not really. The Varelians had taken his childhood, just like they'd taken everything else. "You ready for that?" Kane asked. The boy didn't blink. "I was ready the day they took my sister." A beat of silence passed. Then Kane turned to the bunker behind them, half buried in stone and sand, filled with engineers and techs and people who hadn't smiled in months. Inside sat the blueprint of a new weapon. Not alien, not stolen. Human. It didn't have a name yet, but when it launched, it wouldn't bring peace. It would bring a reckoning. They came with fire this time, not drones, not probes, not diplomats, war fleets, 200 vessels from 12 systems, Varelian-led, but not alone. They brought conscripted species from conquered planets, some forced by ancient treaties, others manipulated into obedience through fear or favors, a show of power, unity, and vengeance. They called it the Purity Armada. Their mission was clear: cleanse Earth, end the human infection. No more mercy, no more experiments, no more integration, just extinction. They arrived on the 117th day. From the moon, they looked like a second sky, silver and black ships stacked in layers, forming a halo of death. The biggest among them was a mobile command dreadnought the size of New York, codenamed Oracle Spire, equipped with kinetic rods, molecular disruption beams, and the latest AI battlefield calculators. They didn't broadcast a warning. They didn't ask for surrender. They opened fire. The first strike was surgical. Tungsten rods rained down like the wrath of forgotten gods, slamming into Earth's surface at Mach 12. The Pacific boiled. The Himalayas cracked. An old dam in what was once Brazil exploded, flooding hundreds of square miles. Cities vanished, towers toppled, whole resistance outposts were erased in flashes of white light. The Varelians watched it unfold from orbit with calculated indifference. To them, this wasn't cruelty. This was cleaning. But what they didn't know, what they never learned, was that Earth had stopped building cities. Everything the fleets hit was empty. Decoys, shells, fake power signatures and echoing heat trails, controlled chaos. The real Earth had gone underground, into bunkers, into cave systems, into places the satellites couldn't see and the algorithms couldn't predict. Below, where men like Kane waited. In a hollowed-out missile silo deep beneath Greenland, Kane watched the bombardment unfold on a flickering, patched-up monitor. The feed came from hacked Varelian satellites, rerouted through a scavenged orbital buoy they'd taken months ago during the Havenspire raid. Smoke poured from the speakers. Heat crackled in the circuits. But the message was clear. "They're here," Rusk said, limping into the room with one leg wrapped in blood-soaked bandages. Kane didn't look at him. His eyes were locked on the black shape of Oracle Spire, hovering like a judgment over the Atlantic. "You got the payload?" Kane asked. Rusk nodded. 3 of them, loaded into the arc haulers, still running hot, but stable. "And the gate?" Rusk looked grim. "Tested once. It worked, barely. But if it collapses mid-transit, we'll lose the whole strike team." Kane turned from the screen. "Then we don't miss." 2 hours later, the arc haulers launched from a hidden canyon near the former Chilean border. Massive, ugly transport ships built from Earth's last functioning fusion cores. They didn't look like warships. They weren't meant to. They were missiles with pilots. Inside the first was Kane, strapped into a harness, his face grimy, his pulse steady. The others behind him were silent. Fighters who'd survived orbital strikes, who'd watched their cities burn, and still kept loading ammo and stitching up their wounds. One of them, an older man named Kov, grunted, "So this is it? We hit 'em back?" Kane didn't look up. "We end them." And then the ships jumped. No fancy Varelian slipstream, no calibrated warp, just raw, human-engineered dimensional piercing. A half-functioning gateway ripped from stolen tech and stabilized with physics that should have never worked. They didn't travel through space. They punched a hole in it and bled through. The side effects were instant: nausea, temporary blindness, hallucinations. But Kane held steady, focused. He'd stared into the void before. This time it blinked first. Oracle Spire's bridge was quiet. Too quiet. The fleet's commander, High Strategist Thalvek, watched the bombardments continue from a reinforced viewing dome. Around him, information flowed across translucent screens. Statistics, casualty projections, structural integrity charts. Earth was breaking. And yet, something felt wrong. Thalvek turned to one of the ship's neuro-aids, a thin Varelian with half of its head encased in a cognition net. Any return fire? None, strategist. Human broadcasts? Silence. Pattern analysis? Unknown. Probability deviation at 87%. Human reaction is illogical. Thalvek narrowed his eyes. Or too logical for us to understand. That's when the alarms screamed. The Arcallers arrived. Not in stealth. Not in silence. In violence. They tore out of a rift just kilometers from Oracle Spire's hull, their exteriors already ablaze from entry. One slammed into a support cruiser mid-flight, ripping it in half before detaching its escape pods like fangs. The other two dove straight toward Oracle Spire. Thalvek screamed for shields, but it was too late. The first pod hit the hull and cut through it, liquid metal carving a hole in the command dome. Explosions rippled through the outer shell, decks vented into space, lights died. And from the broken spine of the ship, humans poured in. Kane landed hard, rolling across the burning floor of Deck 9. He rose to his feet, coughing smoke, ears ringing. Gunfire lit the hallway. He didn't wait. His rifle snapped up, and he moved like a storm. 3 Varelians dropped in seconds. One tried to crawl away. He put a boot on its throat and crushed it. Behind him, Kov took a plasma shot to the ribs and went down, but not before blowing a hole through the ship's security node. The floor trembled. Sirens wailed in multiple languages. Chaos. Perfect. Thalvek barely escaped the command deck. His once perfect robes now torn, his face burned. He fled through the collapsing hallways with a small guard unit. "How did they get here?" he shouted. "How?" The aide beside him, bleeding from a cracked skull, wheezed out one word. "Gate." That was impossible. Earth didn't have gate tech. Not stable, not safe. It required quantum balance, phased slip control, infinite energy reserves. Humans didn't have that, unless they'd stolen it, or worse, made their own. Kane reached the core chamber within 17 minutes of breach. Only one guard team remained, already locked in a brutal standoff with human fighters. Bodies littered the deck. He kicked down the last door. And there it was. The Ether Core. Oracle Spire's heart. The machine that controlled fleet positioning, gravitational stability, orbital anchor alignment. Destroy it, and the whole fleet would fall out of the sky. Rusk's voice crackled over the comm, half static. "You got eyes on the core?" "Affirmative. Then finish it." Kane walked forward, plasma charges in hand. He planted the first, then the second, then finally the last, right under the primary conduit. The lights around the core flickered. Voices screamed in his earpiece. The ship was moving, listing, groaning, reacting like a living thing. Kane didn't run. He stood in front of the core and whispered, "This was your choice." Then pressed the detonator. Oracle Spire broke. From orbit, it looked like a black flower blooming, metal peeling back, energy bursting outward, limbs of flame and shattered steel tumbling across the sky. And then, it fell. The command ship plummeted into Earth's atmosphere, trailing fire like a dying comet. The fleet around it buckled. With their command core gone, coordination collapsed. Targeting systems went blind. Communications died. Some ships tried to flee. Others crashed into each other. One detonated in low orbit, sending fragments down like knives. Within an hour, half the fleet was gone. And Earth still standing. From the ground, Rusk stood outside the Greenland bunker, watching flaming debris paint the sky. He leaned against a shattered pylon, holding his side where a metal shard had lodged deep. The boy from Zurich stood next to him, face illuminated by fire. "Did we win?" the boy asked. Rusk exhaled smoke. "We ain't dead." "Close enough." Kane didn't make it back. His pod had failed on re-entry, or maybe it never launched. But in the weeks that followed, his face spread across every underground channel. Grainy footage, static-soaked audio. His last message, stitched together from fragments, became a war cry. "We warned you. We begged you. You didn't listen. And now you'll remember us. Every time you see something burn." The galaxy had rules, not laws, not treaties. Rules, the kind that weren't spoken out loud but were understood by every sentient mind that had ever looked up at the stars and wondered who ruled them. Rule 1, the Varelians never lost wars. Rule 2, if a species resisted, it was pacified. Rule 3, humanity was not a threat. And yet, Oracle Spire had fallen, not to a rival empire, not to a superweapon, but to a race the Varelians once labeled Category 3, emotionally unstable, genetically inefficient, politically fragmented. The galaxy watched Earth burn, and then watched it survive. The aftershock wasn't a day, it was a wave. First came the silence. A silence so loud it crippled the interstellar channels. Every Varelian-controlled sector, every neutral outpost, every listening post buried on frozen moons, all tuned in for the broadcast that never came. The flagship was gone. The fleet was gone. Kane was gone. But the transmission, it played anyway. It started with static, then a broken image, grainy, scratched, a figure, tall, bloodied, half-silhouetted in fire. Kane, or what was left of him. He didn't speak a rally cry. He didn't beg for peace. He looked straight into the camera and said, "We were human before you came. Now, we're something else. You don't know what you made. But you'll learn, every time we breathe." Then the screen went black, and the stars never felt the same again. Somewhere in the Durul system, 40,000 light-years from Earth, a minor slave colony erupted into full revolt. It started with one prisoner. He'd seen the Oracle Spire footage. It was all they let the slaves see. They thought fear would keep them obedient. Instead, the image of Earth's sky burning became a torch. The man carved Kane's name into the wall of his cell, using his own broken fingernails. Then he strangled a guard with a food tray chain and took his weapon. In less than 3 hours, the slaves had killed every overseer in the facility. They raised a banner made from scorched uniforms, and they called themselves the First Ashborn. It didn't stop there. The Purity Armada had spread too far. News traveled with the precision of fire in a dry forest. In the Zoril Nebula, merchant fleets stopped answering Varelian toll requests. In the crystal colonies of the Luranth, a young diplomat threw acid in a Varelian ambassador's face and shouted, "Human strength is the new truth." Entire systems, once too terrified to speak out, now lit up with one phrase, "We are human broken, human born, human claimed." Humanity had stopped being a species. It had become a concept, a virus of resistance. Back on Earth, the survivors didn't celebrate. There was no cheering, no champagne, no speeches. Kane was dead. Rusk confirmed it. His escape pod was found shattered over the Atlantic wreckage, crushed between molten steel and Varelian hull fragments. They never found a body, only a hand. Burned, scarred, finger broken. But on the wrist, a strip of metal with 3 words scratched into it. "We warned you." They buried it under the crater of Oracle Spire. No monument, just fire. But death doesn't stop a legend. Especially not his. Kane's name spread faster than the Varelians could contain. and when the galactic networks tried to suppress the transmission, it backfired. Hackers, human and alien, ripped through Varelian security grids. Pirate channels replayed the final message across asteroid colonies. The holographic graffiti appeared in every occupied world. Kane, standing over a pile of dead Varelians, plasma rifle in one hand, a child in the other. The caption? "They made us monsters. We made them history." The Varelians couldn't ignore it anymore. Their perfect world order cracked, and for the first time in 2 millennia, they turned inward. Not to plan, but to argue. The High Circle splintered. Some demanded escalation, planetary destruction protocols, bio-wipes, total planetary sterilization. Others hesitated. "What if we fuel the myth further?" one asked. "What if Earth is already gone and we're just burning ourselves alive chasing its ghost?" But it wasn't a ghost. It was a signal. Earth had started broadcasting again. Open channel, no encryption, no trace scrambling, just coordinates. One set, over and over. They pointed to a derelict Varelian relay station in a dead zone known as the Cradle of Silence, a place abandoned after an AI collapse centuries ago. Why there? The Varelians sent a scout ship. It didn't return. They sent a warship. That didn't return either. Then came the third signal. Same voice, same man, same message. Come find out. In the ashes of Earth, new ships were being built. Not pretty ones, not fast, but untraceable. Ghost-class tech, reverse-engineered from scavenged Varelian ships, stripped of anything Earth-born, warped by black market engineering and the insane brilliance of outcast minds. No flags, no origin, no crew manifests, just payloads and missions. One ship was piloted by a mother who watched her daughter taken for neurological refinement. Another by a pair of twins who grew up in a Varelian labor dome and ate their own shoes to survive. Each one had a name scrawled on its hull. Kane, sometimes with curses, sometimes with prayers, but always with fire. In a quiet corner of the galaxy, on the edge of a drifting trade moon called Bel Torin, a Varelian merchant captain made a mistake. He asked a scarred bartender, what was so special about humans anyway? The bartender, an old ex-merc from some forgotten war, leaned in and said, "You know why your kind lost? You never understood the difference between fear and fury." The Varelian sneered. "You can't win with fury." The bartender nodded. "That's why you lose every time. You're trying to win. We're trying to end you." 2 minutes later, the bar exploded. The bartender's corpse was never found, only his jacket, with one phrase stitched into the collar, "Burn with us." Back on Earth, Rusk was dying. Not suddenly, slowly. Radiation from Oracle Spire's fall had poisoned the air for hundreds of miles. He'd breathed it in, knew what it meant, but he didn't stop working. In the ice caves of the Arctic, surrounded by scavenged machines and whispering engineers, he was building something big. "Gate core?" one of the younger techs asked. "For what?" Rusk smiled through broken teeth. "To go farther than they expect." "How far?" Rusk coughed blood into a rag. "Past their reach." A beat passed. Then he added, "And maybe pull something out of the dark they forgot they left there." The tech blinked. "You're saying, go beyond the fringe?" "Not just go," Rusk said, eyes flaring with madness. "Claim it." The universe had forgotten Earth was dangerous. Now it forgot how to fight it. No central target, no standing army, no demands. Just whispers, just fire. Just ships that weren't supposed to exist. Just people who wouldn't die quietly. In the war rooms of the Varelian homeworld, the new commander stared at a cracked data crystal recovered from the wreckage of a rebel base. It contained a list. Just one name. Over and over. Kane. Kane. Kane, and one word at the bottom. Translated into every known dialect. Unfinished. The Varelians had a name for the outermost sector of mapped space, the grave horizon, not because they believed in ghosts or myths, because even they refused to go beyond it. Every chart, every stellar map, every navigational matrix, no matter how advanced, ended at the same arc of systems, coordinates marked in red. A region so cold, so lightless, that even stars seemed to die faster when they got close. It was said to be where the first war ended. The first real war. Long before the High Circle, before integration, before diplomacy. The Varelians didn't speak of it. But Earth found it anyway, because Rusk built the gate. It wasn't a true gate, not like the Varelian ones, stabilized and mathematically perfect. This one was stitched together from hell, scavenged tech, pulsed crystal cores, human intuition, and the kind of reckless brilliance that burns planets. Rusk was dying when they turned it on. Skin gray, eyes sunken, lungs full of blood. They tried to stop him. Said the prototype was unstable. He just laughed. If I'm dying anyway, might as well die pushing. Those were his last words before the gate roared open like a wound in space. 3 ships went through. One was unmanned. One returned 3 hours later, empty. The third never came back. But the signal did. A low hum, a frequency pulsing with something old. And Kane's voice. "We found something," the message said. Scrambled, broken, but undeniably him. Then another line, distorted into a whisper that made AI cores fail across 4 sectors. They lied about what's out here. Back on Earth, survivors had turned bunkers into cities. No government, no flag, just function. Children trained with rifles. Engineers worked without sleep. Farmers raised food underground, beneath UV lights powered by fusion scraps and fury. They called themselves the Line. Not soldiers, not citizens. The last ones between humanity and forgetting. When word spread that Kane might still be alive, that his ship hadn't been lost but had sent a signal from the grave horizon, everything changed. The boy from Zurich, now grown, took command of the second expedition. He'd never given his real name. People just called him Ash, because he never stopped burning. Ash's fleet wasn't large. It was intentional. 12 ships. Stealth cores, pulse shielding, no markings. Each ship held veterans, survivors, ghosts in flesh. No civilians, no prayers. Just one order. Find what's out there. Kill anything that keeps us from bringing him back. They arrived in the black. Even space felt wrong. No starlight, no heat, just dark. Ancient dark. One pilot cracked 3 ribs from G-force disorientation before they even cleared the gate's edge. Another began screaming on arrival, claiming he saw voices inside the dark. They locked him in cryo, his body liquefied hours later. The first structure appeared 2 days in. It was massive, black stone, floating, not built by Varelians, not even close, more like it had been grown, or worse, birthed. No signals, no radiation, no gravity signature. Ash ordered a drop team. 3 entered. 1 came back. She didn't speak, didn't blink, just handed Ash a metal shard covered in symbols that made the ship's AI crash on sight. She died in her sleep 12 minutes later. Heart failure. She was 23. Ash sent the shard back through a relay drone toward Earth. It made it halfway before it imploded in silence. The data was lost. But the message was clear. Something else was here. And Earth wasn't the first to find it. Then they found the ship, half buried in the orbital debris of a shattered moon. Old. Too old. Pre-galactic standard. Not logged in any records. Kane's ship. The hull was cracked open, Airlock peeled back like something had clawed its way inside. No bodies, just blood. Human and alien. Not Varelian. Something else. And inside, on a flickering wall screen, one final message burned in red text. "We didn't find Kane. He found them." Ash stood inside the cockpit, staring at the words. The silence around him felt wrong, like the ship itself had stopped breathing. He touched the wall. It was cold. Colder than vacuum should be. "Could he still be alive?" one of the soldiers asked behind him. Ash didn't answer. He didn't know which answer was worse. Back in the fleet, one of the recon drones sent a ping, a structure, bigger than anything they'd seen, floating between two dying stars. It wasn't broadcasting, it was calling, a signal on a frequency that matched human EEG spikes under stress, a scream layered into math. And inside that signal, Kane's voice, garbage data mostly, random bursts, but one part came through clear. "This isn't about Earth anymore." Ash ordered the fleet forward. The structure wasn't Varelian. It wasn't built. It was grown. A massive sphere of black and bone-colored ridges wrapped in an orbiting field of frozen corpses. Some human, some alien, some indescribable. As the fleet approached, comms went dead. Artificial gravity warped. 3 ships began experiencing time slippage, crew aging days in minutes. Ash ordered their destruction, no hesitation. He landed on the surface of the thing in a dropship with 5 of his best. No return protocol, just weapons and fire. Inside, it wasn't a structure. It was a mind. Alive, breathing, reacting. They walked through halls made of veins, past doors that pulsed and opened with what sounded like laughter. Blood ran through metal tubes. Voices whispered things no translator could decode. They found remains, armor, weapons, human, Kane's team, burned, torn, but not broken. Then they found the chamber. At the center was Kane. Alive, but not. He was suspended in some kind of field, floating above a pedestal of light. His eyes were open, not blinking, glowing faintly. His skin was scarred in patterns, etched into him. He wasn't alone. Around him the Watchers stood, tall, insectoid, laced with bone and metal. Their mouths didn't open. But Ash heard them. "We took from them once," they said. "They returned with fire. Now you return to us. We remember rage." Ash raised his rifle. "Let him go." The chamber shook. One of the Watchers stepped forward, not threatening, almost reverent. "He chose to stay. He burns brighter here. You called him a man. We call him memory. He is the echo of your extinction." Ash pulled the trigger. It didn't matter. The bullet never reached. The Watcher dissolved before it was hit. Then Kane spoke. His mouth didn't move, but the words were real. "I'm not done yet." The field collapsed. He fell to the ground. Ash caught him. He was warm. Too warm. Like something inside him wasn't human anymore. They ran. Back through the halls. Back to the ship. The sphere started pulsing, like it was waking up. Not from sleep, but waiting. They lifted off seconds before the ground beneath them cracked open and a sound, like a billion screams wrapped in silence, ripped through the void. No pursuit. Just that signal again. Now rewritten. Now clear. He brought the fire. Now you will carry it. Back on Earth, when the fleet returned, the gate collapsed behind them. No one asked what they saw. They didn't need to. They saw it in Ash's eyes. They saw it in Kane. Still breathing. Still alive. But never the same. He didn't speak for days. Just stood on a cliff above the bunker cities, watching the stars. When someone finally asked him what they found out there, he said, "They thought we were the end of something. They were wrong. We're the beginning." Then he smiled, the same way he did before Oracle Spire fell. The stars had grown quiet again, not peaceful, not serene. Quiet, the way a city gets before a riot, or the air before a detonation. That stillness filled the galaxy now, even in systems that had never heard of Earth, even in species that had never seen a human, because everyone knew something had changed. Kane was back, and he brought something with him. He didn't return to the command centers, didn't hold meetings, didn't address crowds. He just walked through the underground cities, past the ash farms and fusion fields, through corridors where children stopped playing and watched him like something holy or haunted had passed by. Ash walked beside him, older now, hardened, carved by war and by what they saw beyond the grave horizon. He didn't ask questions anymore. There were no answers left that could matter. Kane had changed, not just in the way he looked, thinner, quieter, eyes burning with something deeper than rage, but in the way the world moved around him. Electronics fluttered when he walked by. Machines obeyed without command. Sometimes the air itself bent just slightly, like space had learned to fear him too. He wasn't augmented. He wasn't possessed. He was consecrated. Whatever had happened out there in that black place, it hadn't broken him. It had reshaped him. It began with a whisper. One Varelian outpost, gone. No explosion. No survivors. Just a hollow station floating in silence, with a single message carved into the walls in over a dozen languages. We remember Havenspire, then another station, then another, then a minor fleet, burned in formation. The wreckage arranged to spell one word in the language of old Earth: unforgiven. Kane didn't give the order, no one did, but the humans understood, all of them. It wasn't about strategy anymore, not politics, not justice, not even survival. It was debt, and the galaxy owed. The offensive was decentralized. Earth sent nothing. The line sent everyone. Every cell, every colony, every hidden bunker across human space launched their own attacks. Independent, ruthless, coordinated through instinct, not command. Each strike left behind no prisoners, only symbols, scars carved into walls, skulls arranged in spirals. Transmission beacons that played only Kane's last message on loop. You really didn't want this. On the edges of Varelian space, panic set in. Fleets pulled back, defense grids overloaded, civilian transports flooded evacuation routes that had never been tested because no one had ever believed they'd be used. The High Circle tried to regain control, tried to calm the outer systems with words like containment and non-linear resistance. But the outer systems had seen the footage. They saw Oracle Spire fall. They saw the dark place beyond the stars, the one the Varelians said didn't exist. And they heard the rumors that Kane didn't just return, that he brought a god back with him. It wasn't a god, though. It was worse. It was faith. Not religious, not spiritual, just belief, sharpened into something fatal. And once that belief took hold, it infected others. Alien species once allied with the Varelians began defecting, not to join Earth, to join the fire. A soldier from the Onyx Cradle burned his own general alive on live broadcast, shouting, "I am human in purpose, if not in blood." He was killed moments later, but his words spread. They were painted on walls across 6 systems in the next 48 hours. The final phase had no name. There was no need. Because by then, the galaxy had stopped defending itself. It simply tried to hide. The Varelian homeworld was protected by 17 orbital platforms, layered shields, and an artificial gravity moat meant to destabilize incoming FTL arrivals. The line sent 30 ships. Only 6 made it through. But they didn't need 30. Each ship was manned by 6 people. Each carried one purpose: make them remember. They didn't attack military installations. They hit archives, temples, art vaults. Everything that made the Varelians believe they were superior, wiped in fire and steel. Kane arrived later. He walked alone, through the halls of their collapsed parliament, over the corpses of leaders who'd poisoned entire planets in the name of peace. He didn't speak, just stood there as the fire rose around him. And in the center of the inferno, he carved one final message into the steps of their Senate floor. Not a threat, not a victory cry, just a phrase etched in Earth's old tongue. This is what listening too late looks like. Some say he died there, others say he disappeared. There are stories of him appearing across systems after that. Wounded, burning, silent, sometimes helping, sometimes just watching. One merc claimed he saw Kane on a drifting asteroid station years later, surrounded by children who hadn't seen sunlight, teaching them how to load rifles with bare hands. Another report came from a wandering medical frigate. They claimed he walked in with a wounded boy, handed him over without a word, and walked out the airlock into space. No suit, no ship, just vanished. But Earth remained, changed, hardened, silent. They stopped sending messages. They stopped replying to the galaxy's questions. The systems near Earth began calling it the Ember Zone. Not a place, a warning. The galaxy stopped invading, stopped interfering, stopped watching, because Earth never forgot. And no one knew if they'd rise again. But if they did, no one wanted to be the reason. Somewhere in the deepest quadrant of the cradle, on a rogue moon with no name, a fire burns. A small campfire. Around it sits a figure, tall, scarred, watching the stars like he's reading something they forgot to say. A child sits next to him, barely 6, with dirt on his face and a stick in his hand, drawing shapes in the dust. "Were we monsters?" the child asks. The man doesn't answer at first. Then, finally, "No." The child looks up. "What were we?" The man stares into the flames. His eyes reflect something more than fire. He says, "We were the warning.